if you look at studies on victimhood, there are often these short-term benefits. So if you signal your victimhood, I might give you some money. I might not challenge you. I might let you get away with little things here and there. And so in that sense, you have some kind of power and you're getting resources from other people. But what we're also seeing is people who signal their victimhood over like these trivial kinds of offenses, somebody wasn't nice to them at work, or, they're getting in fights with other people and they're always saying it's another person's fault. But generally, even just claiming like, oh, I have like this really specific dietary restriction and everyone's always not appreciating my dietary restriction and like putting me in these bad, like people who complain about these kinds of things, other people will give them like certain kind of status and deference and will listen to them and will take their complaints seriously, but they don't want to deal with those people anymore. They don't want to be friends with them. They don't want them in their social circle. They don't want to have to interact with them. And it's because anytime someone is appealing to someone else for resources, they are now taking advantage of that other person. They've created imbalance between themselves and that person where I'm saying, no, you have to give me special treatment because of X, Y, or Z. And so now I've taken something from you, but I've given nothing in return. All I've done is say, like, you should give me this because I have this terrible circumstance. That's not even your fault.
That's it. Yeah.
And I give an example that I think is kind of maybe an example that probably a lot of people can relate to is we've probably all passed a homeless person on the street and they were asking for money and we gave them a few dollars or something. But we didn't invite them to be our best friend. We didn't invite them to come to dinner. We didn't want to incorporate that person into our lives permanently, introduce them to our children. We've helped this person, we've given them something, but we now have sort of identified that as someone who's taking and not giving. And people in general don't want to have permanent relationships with people who take and don't give. And so anytime we take, even if we get the stuff we're asking for, we are now signaling to other people that we're not good reciprocal social partners who are going to, help me, then I'll help you. And that's the way the relationship's going to work. So you do pay this long-term social price where you can get what you want right now, but in the long run, you're not setting yourself up to have like a strong social community that you're contributing to, and that people will continue to help you in the future. So I do think some people don't think about the fact that when they're asking for third-party assistance from someone else who didn't wrong them, it's not my fault you have this dietary restriction, or it's not my fault that 20 years ago you had like a really terrible childhood. If you continue to use that to request non-reciprocal benefits from other people, over time it's going to wear down your goodwill with those people. And so I think it's important to sort of reflect on the fact that even if we feel like we're getting what we want right now, we might not be getting what we want in the long run. And so I'm hoping like an awareness of that helps. I also think the more people observe other people doing this kind of thing and feel like they're being taken advantage of because other people are signaling victimhood about relatively trivial matters, the more they won't incentivize it anymore. So it could have a sort of shelf life on its own that this was a really common thing people did and it was sort of trendy, but eventually everybody got sick of it and we're not going to entertain it anymore. So that's a possibility. In terms of not falling into it yourself, that's really hard because people who feel like victims really do sincerely feel like victims. And if people don't give them what they want, then they just continue to feel even more and more and more and more victimized because other people aren't meeting their needs. And so you fall into this kind of like cycle where once you have a grievance, if the rest of the world doesn't agree with you that you have a grievance and therefore we ought to treat you better than we treat other people, you can just feel more and more and more victimized over time and hold more and more grudges, dislike more and more people, feel more and more sorry for yourself, which only pushes people further and further away. And you get kind of trapped. And getting over that, I can imagine, would be really, really hard because you'd have to just accept, I'm not going to get anything that I want right now. And nobody owes me anything. And I have to take responsibility for my own suffering and start giving rather than taking. And then maybe that's how I'll finally get the reciprocation I want from other people. If I give to them, then they'll give back to me.
Wow. So
but it's hard to do.
So much there. And it reminds me of there was a section in a book, and I'll speak to the men in the audience and also the women who support men. There was a section in King, Warrior, Magician, Lover where he talked about the different archetypes from a psychological perspective that men go through on their way to becoming a king. Their definition of a king is someone who's responsible, who's embodied, who has good virtues and values, and who does practice what you had shared, reciprocation. Because what I heard from you in so many words is that the crux of victimhood relies on not reciprocating, asking yet not giving. Did I hear you correctly there?
Yes.
And so in the book, what Gillette and Moore talk about is the high chair tyrant who demands and demands and demands because they get just like a child. And I know this because I'm a father. When my children demand something, we're teaching them how to ask for it in a peaceful and respectable way. But it's hard to police 2 billion people on YouTube or, however many billions of people there are on Instagram. It feels like we need a parent to step in for all the parents that really fueled this epidemic of victimhood, parents that were off working where their children were on screens or laptops, which begets the question, what is the role of social media specifically? And if we could even slow down the pace of conversation, because this is such an important point. I mean, when I look at the factors of social engineering and the fact that Rupert Murdoch and, I think there's 6 or 9 media companies that run all programming in the world, what's happening is people are falling prey to narratives that are actually monetizing them by weaponizing victimhood. That's what I see. And I wonder how you see this playing out, just so people can become aware of it. I think people have an inkling of what I'm discussing with you, but really, what are the forces behind this narrative of victimization, and how are people unknowingly weaponized by it and then consequently monetized to buy the things that'll make them feel better because of that narrative in the first place?
Yeah, so I think social media makes things worse because it's anonymous and because it's relatively costless for people. Like sometimes you'll see someone post a story about something bad that happened to them, and maybe they'll get hundreds or thousands or millions of clicks, likes, comments, I'm so sorry, but like whatever. And that can feel to the person receiving that can feel like a huge incentive. This is how I'm going to get attention in the world. This is how I'm going to get the clicks and the likes. And I'm competing with all these people who are doing all these other things, people who are great dancers, people who make really great cooking videos, people who take really cool trips or whatever. And if you learn that the way you can get attention is by portraying yourself that way, that's going to incentivize people to do it more. And it's so costless to the people who are incentivizing it. Oh, all you gotta do is go, boop, like, done. Move on with my day. Forget about it. I don't even know that I barely remember I engaged with you. But if a lot of people do it, it can feel like this really big incentive. So I think that's a way that it makes it worse. I don't know a whole lot about how, like, the whole monetization thing works on social media. Like that's outside of my area of research. So maybe you could tell me how people, I do know there are a lot of, different kinds of, people who promise certain benefits to people and then you can make a career that way. But people are catering, I think, to different groups of people. So I assume some people take a certain strategy and other people take work hard, be disciplined, be nice to other people, and that's the way to turn your life around. But other people, I'm sure, are taking a different approach. And there would be a market for that because that might feel easier. Oh, I don't have to work harder. I don't have to work on myself. I can just essentially feel sorry for myself and other people will, step in and take care of me. So you're probably better suited to answer that question than I am.
Well, yeah, and maybe you can piggyback on this because when I look at social media's role really fueling the victim mentality, there seems to be a pretty strong narrative that we have to accept everyone's truth as objective truth. But subjective and objective are fundamentally different, and you don't need to study Carl Jung or even your work to know that, right? When I believe something is subjectively true, that's my truth. But objectively, we all believe that, heinous things happen to people, and that can be sad at times. That's an objective truth. So objective reality versus individual reality is really the crux I'm talking to you about.
If you like that clip, click the one that's on the screen now, and I promise you, you'll enjoy it just the same, if not more.